So first, we're gonna start with the terrorism definition. From the FBI, terrorism is the unlawful use of force or violence against persons or property to intimidate or coerce a government or its citizens to further certain political or social objectives. And from the Interpol, terrorism encompasses a range of complex threats, organized terrorism in conflict zones, foreign terrorist fighters, radicalized lone wolves, and attacks using chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and explosive materials. Next is the types of terrorism. Law enforcement generally recognize two types of terrorism. The first one is domestic terrorism. It's a violent, criminal acts committed by individuals and groups to further ideological goals stemming from domestic influence, such as those of a political, religious, social, racial, or environmental nature. The second is international terrorism. It's a violent criminal acts committed by individuals and or groups who are inspired by or associated with designated foreign terrorist organizations or nation state sponsor. The difference is domestic terrorism is based and executed in the state by their own citizens without foreign direction. But the international terrorism, which is connected to foreign governments or groups, transcends nation boundaries. Terrorist acts against citizens can occur anywhere in the world. It can divide specifically in 8 types of terrorism. The first one is the new terrorist. The modern terrorist environment that arose during the end of the 20th century, culminating in the September 11, 2001, terrorist attacks in New York City. The new terrorism is characterized by the threat of mass casualty, attacks from dissident terrorist organizations, new and creative organizational configuration, transnational religious solidarity, and redefine moral justifications for political violence. Second is state terrorism. Terrorism committed by governments against perceived enemies. State terrorism can be directed externally against adversaries in the international domains or internally against domestic enemies. The example is Saddam Hussein used violence against the Kurds, or even the suppression of democratic protesters in Syria. The third is dissident terrorism. Terrorism committed by non-state governments and groups against governments, ethno-national groups, religious groups, and the other perceived enemies. The example is Irish Republican Army bombing the target in Britain, and the KKK supported white supremacy against non-whites or the Jewish. For this religious terrorism motivated by an absolute belief that an otherworldly power has sanctioned and commanded the application of terrorist violence for the greater glory of the faith. Religious terrorism is usually conducted in defense of what believers consider to be the one of true faith. The example is in Israel. Both Jewish and Muslim are militant to justify communal violence. 5 is ideological terrorism. Terrorism motivated by political system of belief or ideologies, which champion the self-perceived inherent rights of a particular group or interest in opposition to another group of interest. The system of belief incorporates theoretical and philosophical justification for violently asserting the rights of the champion group of interest. The example is Action Direct in France. 6 is international terrorism. Terrorism that spills over onto the world stage. Targets are selected because of their value as symbols of international interest, either within the home country or across state boundaries. 7 is criminal dissident terrorism. This type of terrorism is solely profit-driven and can be some combination of profit and politics. For instance, traditional organized criminals accrue profit to fund their criminal activity and for personal interests, while criminal political enterprises acquire profit to sustain their movement. So the last one is gender selective terrorism. Terrorism directed against an enemy populations, men or women, because of their gender. Systematic violence is directed against men because of their perceived threat posed by males are potential soldiers or source of opposition. Systematic violence is directed against women to destroy an enemy group's cultural identity or terrorize the groups into submission.
Historical background. Despite the ethnic affinity of the people of the Patani region, with their Malay neighbor to the south, the old Patani kingdom was led by sultans who historically refer to pay tribute to the distant Siamese kings in Bangkok. For many centuries, the king of Siam restricted himself to exacting a periodic tribute in the form of brangramas, little tea with gold leaves and flowers that were a symbolic acknowledgement of Siamese suzerainty, leaving the Patani rulers largely alone. Next, forced assimilation and local nationalism. However, By 1934, Marshal แปลกพิบูลสงคราม set in motion of a process of Thaification which has as its objective the cultural assimilation of the Patani people among other ethnic groups in Thailand. The National Culture Act was enforced as a result of the Thaification process, promoting the concept of Thainess and its centralist aim. Its mandate was directly aimed at the Patani people. By 1944, Thai civil law was enforced throughout the land including the Patani region, overriding earlier concession to local Islamic administrative practice. The school curriculum was revised to be Thai-centric, without lessons in the Thai language, to the detriment of the local Jawi. Traditional Muslim courts that formerly handled civil cases were removed and replaced with civil courts run and approved by the central government in Bangkok. This forced assimilation process and the perceived imposition of Thai Buddhist cultural practice upon their society were irritants to the ethnic Malay Patani. In 1947, Haji Sulong, founder of the Patani People Movement, launched a petition campaign demanding autonomy, language and cultural rights, and implementation of Islamic law. In January 1948, Sulong was arrested on treason charges, along with other local leaders branded as separatists. Sulong was released from jail in 1952, then disappeared under mysterious circumstances in 1954. Denied recognition as a culturally separate ethnic minority, Patani leaders react against the Thai government policy towards them, inspired by ideology such as Nationalism. In the 1950s, a Patani nationalist movement began to grow, leading to the South Thailand Insurgency. By 1959, Tengku Jalal Nasser established the Patani National Liberation Front (BNPP), the first Malay rebel group at the time of their foundation. The goal of the nationalist movement, such as the Patani United Liberation Organization (PULO), established in 1968, was succession. The emphasis was less in pursuing an armed struggle toward an independent state, where Patani people could live with dignity without having alien cultural values imposed on them. Next, casualty. According to government data from 2004 until the end of 2012, the conflict had resulted in at least 3,380 deaths, including 2,316 civilians, 372 troops, 278 police, 250 suspect insurgents, 157 education officials, and 7 Buddhist monks. According to one report in the Patani Post in late May 2014, about 6,000 people have been killed in the conflict during the previous decade. A January 2016 article in the Bangkok Post reports a total of 6,543 deaths and 11,919 injuries from 2004 until the end of 2015, with an estimate 15,374 insurgency-related incidents occurring during the same period from 2016 to November 2017. 160 more people have died too. The insurgency is geared against the government, Thai security force, and Buddhist civilians. In the general period of the conflict, 60% of casualties have been Muslim, most of whom were killed at the hands of insurgents. Next is human rights issues. The 2010 World Report from Human Rights Watch highlights escalating human rights abuse throughout Thailand, with the South reflecting overall policy against individual human rights, sharply increased power for police and the military were accompanied by a perceived lack of accountability, government harassment of suspected insurgents.
Next is global influence Southern Thailand, during which Malaysia have proven particularly testing because of the existence of a range of complicated issues, namely historical background of Malaysian sympathy and support from the separatist movement, the dual nationality of numerous Malay Muslims residing in the southern Thailand, the closeness of the borders, and the questionable commitment of both parties to information exchange and intelligence cooperation. At the heart of the problem, however, as one Malaysian special branch officials share, were the difficulty that Malaysia, a predominant Muslim country, encountered in being seen by both its domestic Muslim constitution and these borders Muslims were as tolerating or worse yet, assisting in the Thai government ill treatment of Malay Muslims in the South. The situation have not been held by regular press reports and repeats accusations made on the part of Prime Minister Thaksin and some cabinet colleagues. The Malaysia have harboring militants. An important consideration is absence external influence on the Islamization of dissidents in Thailand is the impact of the Islamic resistance and concomitant political developments in the Muslim world, such as the Iranian Revolution and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, both of which took place in 1970. The Islamization process has largely been facilitated by the return of numerous Malay Muslim students from foreign educational institutions, where after crackdowns on religious schools by the Thai government during the military regime of the 1960s and early 1970s, they emerged under the auspices of financial support from Arab government and international Islamic charity. One outcome of this has been the accelerated growth in the religion tendency to separatism, whichever separatist organization with a secular bent attempts to capitalize on it, as in the case of Peru. The question is how events in the global Ummah inform local incidents have gained greater currency in the wake of recent developments and concern from the possible existence of linkage between Southern Thailand militant and foreign terrorist organizations. To be sure, their concerns have some foundation. Reports have surfaced of video and training manual film in Taliban rule, Afghanistan and Chechnya, being found in the religion schools and residence of local religion teachers. Images of Southern Thailand variant have appeared on international jihad websites. In June 2003, several supported G members were arrested in Thailand. Aside from G and Al Qaeda, authors have attempts to link Southern Thai militancy to Bangladesh. Some, for example, point to potential links built allow Thai Muslim study in questionable Bangladesh matters. The Wahhabi connection manifested in the presence of the Yala Islamic College and several religious schools led by members of its alumni and personified in the college lecture. All of them show you about Islam have gained greater currency in the course of conflict. Nationalism remains a core primary on ethnic reference point Malay Muslims in the case of Thailand, and has been tending towards a civic dimension is so far the question of crimes to aesthetics Bangsamoro identity is concerned. The Islamization of their conflicts tends in directed not at the purification of Islam by riding the face of deviance, such as the taking place in Pakistan and Iran between Shia and Sunni Muslim, the ideological emulsification of the liberal democratic way of life at Sayyid Qutb Pinch, nor the anti-West, anti-Zionist global jihad ends of the neo-Salafi movements. Rather, it is directed to context-specific political objectives of self-determination, regaining lost national identity, setting right physical wrongs, and create a sovereign nation-state. In other words, our understanding of the region contents of their conflicts cannot be divorced from the specific historical, political, and ethnic context to which they remain core on the local identity and politics that frame them.
How South Thailand Insurgency affects Muslim world. Since crusade attack by incident in 2004, Muslim world has been following the events and show concern about Thai government's Southern Insurgency resolution. On 24th of January 2007, there was a conference between Thailand and Muslim countries about resolving Thailand's Southern Insurgency and about foreign policy toward Muslim countries. There was an opening speech of the Prime Minister. He said, even though the violence in the southern provinces is not about terrorist movement, but one part that makes the current problem intensify is because of the current events in Muslim world, whether it not be in Iraq, Palestine or somewhere else, which made Muslims feel like they were bullied. With this reason, the dissidents in the southern provinces used the religion to justify their actions and demanded attention from Muslim world in order to keep the eyes on Thailand's southern provinces. Therefore, in foreign affairs, the mention of southern provinces must be the topic we should concern about too. The Thai government is managed by the Prime Minister Jen Surayut Chulanon. Invite the Secretary General of the OIC, Professor Akmi Lakdin Ihanoglu, along with his group, visit Thailand on April 30 to May 1st of 2007. In this trip to Thailand, the OIC Secretary General has written a letter to Thai Muslims in the three southernmost provinces, calling all parties to join in opposition to use of violence, but to turn and live together in harmony and cooperate with the Thai government in solving problems that arise. The OIC Secretary General asked Thai Muslim and officials in the southern border provinces to comply with the country's laws. Do not let everyone connect Islam to terrorism, and the offender must be brought to punishment. However, in the long term, the Thai government would like to repeal or restrict the enforcement of the emergency decree on public administration in the state of emergency. Because the laws allows for teaching that is against Islam, and we urge everyone to adhere to respect for human rights and differences in religion and culture. In addition, the OIC is willing to work with the Thai government to help solve the problems that arise. The OIC is an organization that promotes peaceful coexistence. Do not promote the insurgency and disagree with the use of violence or torture. And the Thai government has to be patient in solving such problems that will take time, which could be 10 or 20 years.
Okay, now I will talk about the stakeholder in crisis. There are two stakeholders: is Thailand's government and to Barisan Revolusi National Melayu Patani. The first, Thailand government. The Thai government has begun to see people in the southern part of country as separatist ideas. During the reign of General Paul Songkram, the Thai government later tried to suppress those whom the government considers separatists all along. There will be very evident in 2004, including the mass gun robbery of the government on January 4, the terrorist attack at Grisam Mosque on April 28, the death of 108 bodies, and the dissolution of the frontline protest police station of Tak Bai in Narathiwat province on October 25 resulted in another 84 deaths. In recent decade, the Thai government had launched a peace between the Thai government and the Barisan Revolusi National Melayu Patani or BRN, especially during the government of Yingluck Shinawatra, where negotiations were opened with the Malaysian way as a middleman. But when Thailand took a coup, the military government led by General Prayut Chan-o-cha had shown a lack of determination and want the insurgents to surrender to the state. Rather than concentrating on agreement with leaders of the foreign asylum movement, the National Council of Peace and Order has also blocked political expansion across the country. And second is Barisan Revolusi National Melayu Patani. The Barisan Revolusi National Melayu Patani, also known by the shorter BRN, mean National Revolutionary Front, is an Islamic Patani independence movement in northern Malaysia and Patani, southern Thailand. As of 2017, it is the most powerful rebel group in the region. Originally, the BRN was established as a largely territorial organization, prioritizing Patani secessionism. Since 2001, however, the BRNC or BRN Coordinacy has become its most active wing, leading the South Thailand Insurgency and imposing extreme religious values on the local society. The BRNC, through its Bajan Khmer Deccan Patani paramilitary wing, is the main group behind the murder of teachers in the southern border province. However, terrorism several times, the BRN may wish for negotiation to find a path to peace.